Tonight, we uncover a secret so strange, so world-altering, that it should have rewritten history centuries ago. A legend hidden beneath waves and stone. A whispered tale of a second oak island created not by chance, but by the Templars themselves. Not a treasure pit of gold, but a mirror vault built to guard knowledge too powerful for kings and too dangerous for the church. For generations, explorers searched the wrong island, while the real secret slept in the frozen north, guarded by carved symbols, ancient star maps, and traps still alive after 700 years. Those who approached it vanished. Those who uncovered its clues were silenced. And those who claimed to see what lay beneath its surface were never believed again. Because this island was never meant to be found. It was built to protect scrolls and relics that could unravel everything we think we know about the past. And the ones who buried them made sure the world would forget. But tonight, we return to the mystery. The second island, the one that was hidden on purpose. Before we go any deeper, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. You are going to need the light where we are headed. Something strange happens when a map appears that should not exist. It feels like history itself takes a deep breath, as if the past is waiting for someone brave enough to notice what everyone else has ignored. That is exactly what happened when a forgotten parchment surfaced inside a private European archive. It was old, older than the paper it was written on, older than the handwriting that traced its faded lines. And on it was an island no one could identify, marked with symbols that sent chills through anyone who recognized them, because they were the same secret signs carved into stones on Oak Island in Nova Scotia. The moment scholars saw the map, whispers filled the room. Some thought it was a mistake. Others believed it was a forgery. But a few looked at it with a fear they tried to hide, because if the map was real, it meant something impossible. It meant Oak Island was not the only island touched by the Knights Templar. The parchment arrived without warning inside a weathered leather tube sealed with crimson wax. No one knew who delivered it. The archive staff found it placed gently on a table before dawn, as if someone had walked in silently during the night. When they opened it, they saw ink made from minerals no longer used, and maritime markings that did not match any known medieval cartographer. Yet the symbols at the edges were unmistakable. A cross nested inside a circle, a serpent twisting around a star, a set of lines forming a perfect triangle pointing into the unknown. These symbols were identical to the ones found deep beneath Oak Island, carved into wooden planks and stones that dated back to the 1300s. Experts gathered around the map, trying to place the island, but every attempt failed. It was not in the Mediterranean. It was not in the North Sea. It was not in the Caribbean. It was nowhere. Yet it was drawn with such confidence that the artist must have seen it with their own eyes. More unsettling was the ink that traced a second set of marks. Faint, almost erased. A row of tiny circles that matched a pattern discovered inside the money pit on Oak Island. It was as if the map was trying to speak, but someone long ago had tried just as hard to silence it. Soon, rumors spread beyond the archive walls. Some claimed the parchment was part of a lost Templar collection, stolen during raids centuries earlier. Others believed it was evidence of a second refuge, built by the Templars after they fled La Rochelle in the early 1400s. A few whispered something even darker. That Oak Island was only a distraction, and the true treasure, or secret, or relic had always been hidden somewhere else entirely. The map raised more questions than answers. Why would the Templars create two identical systems across the ocean? What forced them to hide knowledge in places so remote that even kings and popes could never find them? And why did this second island vanish from every record until now? As the parchment rested beneath the cold lights of the archive, one thing became clear. Someone did not want this map destroyed. Someone wanted it found. And whoever that someone was, they had just reopened a mystery the world was never meant to solve. The night the Templar fleet vanished from La Rochelle was a night history should have remembered. Yet strangely it did not. No poet wrote of it. No king recorded it. No chronicler dared to describe what happened as the moon rose over the harbour on that October evening in the year 1307. But sailors who lived long enough to whisper their final confessions told a different story. They said the ships did not escape in panic. They moved with calm purpose, as if following a plan created long before their enemies closed in. The truth was that the Templars had expected the betrayal. They had watched the tension grow between their order and the French crown. They knew the king wanted their wealth and feared their influence. So when soldiers marched toward their commanderies, the Templars were already slipping into the darkness on ships packed with crates, scrolls, and strange relics wrapped in cloth older than Christendom itself. Witnesses who saw the fleet leave claimed the ships sailed in perfect formation, as if guided by some invisible hand. The Templars didn't navigate by the usual trade routes. They looked to the stars. Not in the simple way ordinary sailors did, but in a way that seemed almost mathematical, almost prophetic. Some later believed they followed ancient star paths, taught to them by scholars from the East. Others said they carried charts no one else in Europe had ever seen. Whatever the truth was, the fleet sailed west, a direction filled with uncertainty and danger. Many believed they would be swallowed by storms or drift into endless waters. But the Templars were not lost. They were following a route known only to their highest initiates, a celestial roadway that guided them across the ocean long before compasses became common in Europe. Legends passed down through secret circles claim that the fleet stopped at no ports. They did not search for food or supplies. It was as if they already knew where land would appear. This idea confused historians for years, until a few brave researchers suggested a possibility that mainstream scholars refused to accept. The Templars may have had knowledge of lands far beyond the edge of the medieval world. They may have known where to sail long before Columbus was ever born. There are old carved stones in Scotland that show ships sailing west with a 9-pointed star above them. There are mysterious wooden beams found on Oak Island in Nova Scotia that appear far older than the date of European arrival. There are even fragments of journals from monks who wrote of visitors who arrived from across the sea carrying a red cross on white cloth. All these clues point to one idea. The Templar fleet did not vanish. It reached its destination. Somewhere beyond the reach of kings, beyond the control of the church, the Templars hid something they believed the world was not ready to protect. And if the map found in the archive truly shows a second secret island, then their final voyage was not an escape. It was a mission that had been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself centuries later. There are moments in history when a single discovery unlocks a doorway that was never meant to be opened. That is what happened when researchers studying old Templar manuscripts noticed a strange pattern hidden between the lines. At first, it looked like nothing more than decorative symbols, the kind monks sometimes added to fill empty space. But as they compared different manuscripts copied in different centuries, they saw something impossible. The symbols appeared in the same order every time, almost like steps in a silent dance waiting for someone to follow. When the pattern was finally decoded, it revealed a phrase written so carefully that it seemed designed to survive across generations. The phrase was the code of the Triple Cross. This code spoke repeatedly of a place called the Mirror Isle, not a place known on any map, not a territory claimed by any kingdom. It was described as a twin refuge, a shadow of another island already used by the Templars. That other island, many scholars now believe, was Oak Island in Nova Scotia. But if Oak Island was only one half of a greater design, then the Mirror Isle held the other half. The idea alone was enough to unsettle historians, because it suggested the Templars had planned their escape and their legacy with far more precision than anyone ever imagined. The code itself was written in a layered cipher. On the surface, it looked like ordinary Latin, but each third word carried an alternate meaning drawn from ancient Greek. And buried. Beneath that was a second transformation based on a Hebrew numbering system. Only initiates trained in all three languages could ever hope to read it correctly. The triple system was why the code earned its name. 3 languages, 3 layers, 3 crosses woven into a single message. When all the layers were aligned, the text revealed instructions. It spoke of 2 islands built as reflections of one another. One would be known. One would remain hidden. One would serve as the imperfect shield. One would protect the truth. The manuscripts hinted that Oak Island held traps and decoys meant to mislead treasure hunters for centuries. But the Mirror Isle was designed differently. It held something the Templars truly feared losing. Something they believed would bring danger if left unguarded. Something that only the most trusted members of the Order were allowed to approach. As the translations spread quietly through certain academic circles, people began noticing strange similarities in carvings inside European churches. 3 crosses placed in triangular patterns, twin suns rising over twin waves, a star that split into 2 reflections. Were these carvings spiritual, or were they coded messages disguised as religious art? More troubling was a note hidden at the end of one manuscript. Written in faded ink, barely readable, it said that only one island would ever be discovered by accident. The other would reveal itself only when the world could finally understand what was buried there. If that is true, then the recent appearance of the mysterious map may be more than coincidence. It may be the first sign that the Mirror Isle is ready to step out of the shadows. There is a strange emptiness in the history of the Renaissance. An emptiness shaped like a man whose name once appeared in royal records, merchant logs, and guild registers, only to vanish, as if someone had reached back through time and erased him. His name was once whispered among cartographers as a genius who drew maps with knowledge no ordinary sailor could possess. Yet today, almost nothing about him survives. Not his workshop, not his letters, not even his birthplace. It is as if he never lived at all. But fragments of his work still exist, hidden inside private collections and sealed archives. And the moment researchers compared those fragments, they noticed something no one could explain. The coastlines he drew were too accurate for the 15th century. Entire landmasses that Europe had not yet explored appeared on his parchment with such confidence that he must have copied them from older charts. Charts far older than the Renaissance. Charts that someone did not want the world to see. When his maps were placed side by side with known Templar diagrams, the resemblance was unsettling. The same curves in the shoreline, the same measurements of distance, the same mysterious symbols placed near the edges, symbols that matched the markings carved into the hidden structures on Oak Island. Even more shocking was the outline of an island shown on one of his surviving sketches. It did not match any known geography. It did not appear on any later map. It had no name. Yet the coastline was drawn with a detail that suggested the artist had studied it carefully. Scholars began calling it the Ghost Island. Some believed it was an early attempt to draw Newfoundland. Others thought it was a mistake. But a few who had studied Templar navigation secrets recognized the shape immediately. It matched the silhouette shown on the mysterious parchment found inside the European archive, the same impossible island that should not exist. As researchers dug deeper into the cartographer's life, they found that he had worked for a brief time under a wealthy patron with ties to old noble families known for supporting hidden religious orders. Records showed that he once purchased a chest of unknown documents from a sailor who claimed to have travelled with men who carried a red cross on white cloth. After that point, the cartographer's work changed. His maps became more detailed, his coastlines sharper. It was as if he suddenly possessed knowledge far beyond the explorers of his day. Then his name disappeared from all records in the year 1502. No explanation, no note, no death record, nothing. And yet, 100 years later, a monk copied a strange message into the margin of a manuscript. He wrote that a map maker had been silenced because he drew what should have remained hidden. Many believe that message refers to him. If his maps truly came from Templar sources, then he may have been the last person to possess original charts pointing to both Oak Island and the Mirror Isle. And if someone erased him from history, it was not because he drew too little. It was because he drew too much. Rosslyn Chapel has always felt like a place built to hide something. People step inside expecting a church, but the carvings covering every wall and pillar feel more like pages from a book written in a language no one has fully learned to read. Some symbols are ordinary, some are familiar, but others seem placed there for a different kind of visitor, someone who already knew what to look for. Among these carvings lies the secret known as the hidden compass, an arrangement of symbols so precise that it cannot be decoration. It points toward a place far across the ocean, a place wrapped in fog and mystery. The discovery began when a researcher noticed that certain symbols in the chapel appeared in repeating sets: a star carved on a pillar, a flower etched into the underside of an arch, a strange geometric knot placed above a window. At first, the repetition seemed random, but when the carvings were mapped in order, their positions formed a pattern. The pattern aligned perfectly with a compass rose, the kind used by navigators long before the age of Columbus. Yet this compass did not point north. Its markings aimed west, toward a region of the Atlantic that medieval Europe believed was empty. That direction only became more suspicious when scholars measured the angle of the stone star positioned near the chapel's eastern wall. The star's angle matched the exact direction sailors would need to travel from Scotland to reach the coast of Nova Scotia. But the most unsettling clue, appeared on a column carved with vines, twisted around a series of small cubes. Each cube held a symbol from Templar iconography: a cross, a rose, a teardrop shape, and a spiral that matched carvings found on artifacts recovered from Oak Island. When the symbols on the cubes were decoded, they formed a message. It spoke of a land beyond the horizon where guardians placed knowledge inside the earth so time could not destroy it. Some believed Roslin's builders were hinting at Oak Island. Others suspected they were pointing to something even further, perhaps the Mirror Isle described in Templar codes. The idea gained strength when historians discovered that Roslin Chapel was built by a family with rumoured ties to both the Templars and early voyages to the New World. They had the wealth and secrecy needed to protect ancient knowledge. They also had access to documents the Church did not want circulating. Legends say that inside Roslin there is a sealed vault containing maps and relics brought from distant lands. No one has been allowed to open it. And if the carvings inside the chapel truly form a compass, then the vault may hold the final piece of the puzzle. It may reveal why the Templars travelled west and what they hoped to protect. Roslin's hidden compass is more than stone. It is a doorway cut across centuries, a reminder that some journeys begin long before history admits they happened. And somewhere across the Atlantic, the path it points to still waits in silence. There are places on our planet that seem to hide themselves, even when they are right in front of us. One of those places is a remote island far to the north, a cold and silent patch of land once visited by Norse explorers during their journeys across the Atlantic. For centuries, this island appeared in sagas only as a strange stop along their route, a place where fires couldn't stay lit and where carved stones jutted from the ground like broken teeth. No one thought much of it until clues from Templar documents and forgotten maps began to point toward it again. This island was uninhabited for most of recorded history, which made the stories told by Norse sailors even more unsettling. They spoke of vaults beneath the earth, built with a skill their people did not possess. They described foreign metalwork sealed inside chambers carved with symbols they could not read. They never claimed these structures belonged to them. Instead, they believed they had stumbled upon something left behind by an older and more secretive people. When archaeologists in the modern era visited the island, they expected to find nothing more than weathered rocks. Instead, they found stones arranged in unnatural patterns, forming a faint outline that mirrored the same triangular layout found on Oak Island. Even more shocking was a piece of metal discovered beneath a layer of soil untouched for centuries. Tests revealed that the metal was shaped using techniques unknown to the Vikings, and that it matched the composition of artifacts linked to medieval Europe. The island was not supposed to hold anything from that era, yet it did. As researchers studied the area more closely, they found a narrow opening hidden between two cliffs. Inside the opening was a chamber lined with stone blocks that looked carved rather than broken. The ceiling was reinforced with timbers older than any nearby settlement. And at the far end of the chamber sat a large slab etched with a symbol seen only in Templar manuscripts. A cross nested inside a circle, the exact same mark that appears in the money pit on Oak Island. Word of the discovery spread quietly, mostly among people who already suspected that the Templars had reached the Americas long before explorers of the 15th century. This new island appeared to confirm their theory. It was far enough from the known routes of medieval Europe to remain hidden, yet close enough to be reached by sailors who understood celestial navigation. The island seemed to be a perfect mirror to Oak Island. But instead of booby traps and decoy tunnels meant to confuse treasure hunters, this one held structures that felt more like storage. Calm, orderly, purposeful. Almost as if the Templars knew this place would not be found for a very long time. Legends from nearby communities added another layer to the mystery. They spoke of lights moving across the island at night, long before modern explorers arrived. They spoke of stone chambers that hummed with sound when the wind passed through. And they spoke of strangers seen on the coast during ancient times carrying banners marked with a red cross. Whether these stories were true or not, the evidence beneath the soil was real. A second island had emerged from the shadows, and with it came the possibility that the greatest Templar secret was never buried on Oak Island at all. Long before the Templars became famous for their courage in battle, there was another group within their ranks whose names never appeared in heroic stories. These were the Master Builders, men trained not in warfare, but in the hidden science of constructing things meant to last for centuries. Ancient accounts mention them quietly, almost in passing, as if their presence was something only initiates were allowed to understand. They travelled with the Templars from fortress to fortress, from port to port, carrying tools made from rare metals and scrolls filled with geometric diagrams that ordinary soldiers could not read. Some say these builders were taught by scholars from distant lands. Others believe they inherited their knowledge from even older civilizations whose secrets had faded from the world. Whatever their origins were, the builders knew how to create structures that could defy time, pressure, and even human interference. When the Templars fled Europe in the early 1400s, these builders were among the most important members of the escape. They were the ones trusted to construct the hidden vaults meant to guard the Order's most dangerous treasures. These vaults were not simple holes in the ground. They were feats of engineering that even modern researchers struggle to explain. Accounts describe chambers sealed by hydraulic traps that filled with water if opened incorrectly. These traps were so advanced that similar systems would not appear in European engineering until centuries later. Other chambers were built below sea level with pressure locks designed to flood or seal depending on the tides. Only someone who understood the builder's signaling system could open them safely. The builders also used coded stonework, arranging each block with symbols carved on the inner surfaces. When placed together, the stones created hidden messages or instructions that remained invisible to anyone who did not know how to read the pattern. It was a language of stone, a silent communication passed down within the Order. Evidence of their work can be seen on Oak Island, where wooden platforms were stacked at perfect intervals like steps in a buried tower. The precision required for such construction hints at minds far more advanced than typical medieval craftsmen. And now, on the second island newly discovered, the same techniques appear again. Stone corridors built with clean angles, drainage channels carved with mathematical accuracy, support beams placed exactly where the weight of the earth would be greatest. These patterns prove that the builders did not work alone. They followed a design passed down through generations, a design known only to those trusted with the Order's deepest secrets. Some researchers believe the builders were creating more than vaults. They think the Templars were preparing a long-term archive to protect knowledge, the world was not ready to see. Perhaps ancient texts, perhaps relics with power or danger, or perhaps maps and documents that could rewrite history if revealed. The presence of the builders in both islands raises an unsettling question. What were they trying so hard to hide that they built structures capable of surviving the collapse of kingdoms, the rise of new empires, and the silence of time itself? Most people imagine treasure as glittering gold piled high in dark chambers, but the Templars carried something far more valuable than coins or jewels. They carried knowledge, the kind of knowledge that could shatter kingdoms if brought into the wrong hands. When the Order was hunted in the early 1400s, they understood that their greatest danger was not losing wealth, but losing the secrets they had guarded for generations. These secrets were written on scrolls made from rare materials, wrapped carefully in cloth and sealed with red wax. Some scrolls contained ancient maps copied from civilizations that had vanished long before Europe learned to write its own history. Others detailed scientific ideas that would not appear again until the Renaissance. There were also relics, objects tied to early Christianity and even older traditions, objects that challenged the stories preached by the Church. The Templars believed the world was not ready for such things, and that revealing them could bring chaos instead of enlightenment. So they buried them. But they did not bury them randomly. They chose remote places far from the influence of kings and popes. They built vaults designed by their master engineers and placed these forbidden items deep underground where only the most trusted members knew how to reach them. On Oak Island, the traps, tunnels, and wooden platforms were never meant for future treasure hunters. They were meant to delay anyone who did not understand the code. The purpose was not to protect gold, but to make sure the knowledge never surfaced in a world that might misuse it. The second island, the one only recently studied, seemed even more focused on preservation. The chambers there were built with calm precision rather than defensive tricks. The arrangement of the stones looked more like an archive than a bank vault. Everything about it suggested that the treasure hidden within was not something to spend, but something to protect, until humanity reached a time when truth would no longer threaten its rulers. Stories from the Middle Ages claim the Templars possessed writings from ancient libraries destroyed in past wars. There were rumors of scrolls that described the early life of Jesus in ways that did not match church teachings. There were tales of relics that predated Christianity altogether, objects said to hold wisdom from civilizations wiped from memory. The Church saw these things as dangerous. The Templars saw them as precious. Some say the Order never intended to keep the knowledge forever. They planned to return it to the world once humanity grew wiser. But their downfall came too soon and forced them to hide everything before their enemies could seize it. This raises a haunting question. If the Templars believed the medieval world wasn't ready for these truths, are we ready now? And if their treasure contained information capable of reshaping religion, science, and history, then perhaps gold was never the point. The true treasure was knowledge. Knowledge meant never to be found. There is a fragile moment in every mystery when a clue appears that changes everything, not because it answers a question, but because it forces you to ask a new one. That moment came when researchers uncovered the writings of an obscure Templar chronicler, a man whose name was almost erased, yet whose words survived in the margins of a crumbling manuscript. His note was short, written with hurried strokes, as if he feared someone might discover what he was recording. It said that only one island shall be revealed, and the other shall remain in shadow until the world sees clearly again. At first, the message felt poetic, almost like a warning written to future brothers of the Order. But the more historians studied it, the more it seemed like a deliberate instruction. The chronicler had known of 2 islands, not one. He understood that the Templars had created a twin system, 2 sanctuaries separated by distance, but connected by purpose. And he understood that one of those islands would become a distraction. That island, many now believe, was Oak Island. It had the same symbols, the same coded traps, the same mysterious tunnels that drew endless attention. Treasure hunters spent centuries trying to unlock its secrets, convinced that it held the greatest treasure of the medieval world. But what if Oak Island was never meant to be solved? What if its entire design was created to confuse those who searched, pulling their eyes toward a decoy, while the true sanctuary remained hidden in silence? The chronicler's words suggested that the second island was meant to stay concealed until humanity reached a point when truth would no longer be twisted or feared. He seemed to hint that the Templars believed the world of the 1400s was not ready to face what they had hidden. Maybe they feared kings who craved power. Maybe they feared the church, which sought absolute control. Or maybe they feared ordinary people who might destroy what they could not understand. Oak Island's traps made perfect sense through this lens. They were elaborate, clever, and almost impossible to overcome. Anyone trying to dig too far would face collapse after collapse, flood after flood, failure after failure. For hundreds of years the pattern repeated, as if designed to waste time and distract attention. Meanwhile, the second island slept. No wooden planks, no collapsed tunnels, no hidden flood channels. Why, instead, it held quiet chambers, smooth stones, and artifacts arranged with intention. It felt like a place meant to be preserved, not defended. The curse of the unfinished mission was not a spell or supernatural curse. It was the burden of a plan that could not be completed because the Templars fell before they could finish their work. They could only hope that someday someone would find the truth without exposing it to those who would misuse it. Now, with new discoveries pointing toward the Mirror Isle, the world may be standing at the edge of that moment, a moment the chronicler foresaw, a moment when the shadow begins to lift. The Rosicrucians were always surrounded by whispers, a brotherhood that moved through history like a quiet echo. People heard their name in stories of hidden knowledge and forgotten truths, yet almost no one ever saw them. Their symbols appeared in strange places, carved into stones or painted into old manuscripts, as if they wanted to be remembered, but only by those who knew what to look for. Among these manuscripts was one known only as the Black Book of the Rosy Cross. It was small and bound in dark leather that had cracked from age. Most pages were filled with poetic lines about enlightenment and spiritual rebirth. But tucked between those words was a section written in cipher, a section that scholars ignored until recently because they believed it was nothing more than mystical rambling. When finally decoded, the hidden passage described something unexpected. It spoke of a northern vault untouched by time. It claimed that this vault had been created by an order older than the Rosicrucians, but preserved by them through generations. The language used was cautious, almost fearful, as if the writer knew he was recording something forbidden. What caught historians by surprise was how closely the description matched the newly discovered island linked to the Templars. The text mentioned stone chambers reinforced by beams made from ancient forests. It described metalwork sealed within and marked by symbols of a rose and cross, shapes identical to those used by early Rosicrucians. Most importantly, it mentioned that the vault existed on an island unreachable by ordinary travellers. The book never named the island, but it gave clues. A place wrapped in fog for half the year. A place where the sea carved sharp cliffs along the shore. A place where the northern lights could be seen dancing above the horizon. All these details matched the second island. This discovery raised a disturbing possibility. If the Rosicrucians had writings about the vault, then they must have known of the Templars' secret long after the Order fell. It suggested that not all knowledge was lost when the Templars were destroyed in the early 1400s. Some of it survived inside secret societies that continued their mission from the shadows. The Black Book even hinted that members of the Rosicrucian Brotherhood had visited the island at least once. The text described a journey across rough waters and a landing on a stony beach. It spoke of entering a chamber where time seemed to pause, as if the air inside the vault was untouched by the centuries. These details were written with such clarity that it was difficult to believe they were metaphor. This left researchers wondering why the Rosicrucians had kept the memory alive, yet never shared it with the outside world. Perhaps they believed the same thing the Templars did, that the world was not prepared for what the vault protected. As the truth from the Black Book becomes clearer, it feels less like a legend and more like a map written in code. A map pointing to a secret that has been guarded by more than one brotherhood. A secret waiting for the right moment to rise into the light. By the 18th century, the world believed its maps were nearly complete. Explorers had crossed oceans, charted new coasts, and filled in the empty spaces that once frightened medieval sailors. Yet, the northern regions remained a place of mystery, a frozen maze of shifting ice and silent seas. When expeditions set out to find Arctic passageways during this era, they expected danger from storms and cold winds. What they did not expect were the stone markers. The first report came from a small crew sailing under a British flag. They had anchored on a rocky shore to gather supplies when one of the men spotted something strange. It was a stone standing upright, far too perfectly cut to be a creation of nature. At first they assumed it was placed there by earlier explorers. But when they brushed away the frost, they found symbols carved into the surface. A cross nested inside a circle, a pattern of 3 dots arranged in a triangle, a spiral that looked almost identical to the carvings inside Rosslyn Chapel. These markings were unmistakably Templar in style, yet no Templar ship had sailed in those waters during recorded history. The men were unsettled, but their captain ordered them to document the stone. That decision would haunt him. Within days, another stone marker was found along the coast, this one half buried, but bearing the same symbols. The explorers wrote down everything they saw, sketched the shapes, and planned to report their findings to the Royal Society. But before they reached home, they were met at sea by another vessel. Its flags were unfamiliar. Its captain refused to give a name. He requested permission to board and delivered a message with chilling calmness. The men were to forget what they had seen. They were told the stones held no value and that recording them would only cause trouble. When the explorers resisted, the stranger offered gold and a threat. Eventually, the logs containing the sketches were taken, the notes removed, and the crew was warned never to speak of the stones again. Over the next decades, similar encounters were whispered about in taverns and port cities. Crews from France, Denmark, and even Russia mentioned finding strange markers while searching for northern trade routes. Each time, unknown patrons arrived within weeks and silenced the reports. These patrons never said who they worked for. They only repeated the same message. Forget the stones. Forget the symbols. Forget what you saw. Historians now suspect these stone markers were placed by the Templars or their allies as early navigational signs pointing toward the second island. If so, then someone in the 18th century knew the Templars had reached the far north. Someone wanted to keep these clues buried, and someone had enough power to erase the discoveries from official records. The hunters had arrived, not to find treasure, but to stop the truth from resurfacing. Their silence shaped history more than any storm, leaving the northern markers hidden until the world was ready to look again. In the 19th century, when explorers still believed every hidden corner of the world held a chance for greatness, a small and almost forgotten expedition sailed toward the cold northern waters. Their official mission was simple: chart the coastline, collect samples, measure the strange currents that baffled earlier sailors. But the journals of the crew tell a different story. They were following rumors of an island whispered about in fishing villages, a place where stones hummed in the wind and where carved shapes peeked out from beneath the moss. When the crew reached the island, they felt the same uneasy stillness described in ancient Norse stories. No birds circled overhead. No footprints marked the sand. The island seemed untouched by time. On the second day, a young crewman noticed a line of stones forming a faint trail that led inland. The stones were too evenly spaced to be natural. When the men dug around the first one, they found it had been cut by human hands. Encouraged, they followed the trail until it ended at a mound half swallowed by earth. The mound looked like nothing more than a hill, but the soil around it was lighter and looser, as if disturbed long ago. The crew decided to dig. What they uncovered was an object that should not have existed. It was a carved slab made from a type of stone not found anywhere in the region. Even stranger was the writing etched into its surface. The letters were clear, sharp, and unmistakably medieval Latin. The men who could read Latin were stunned. The inscription spoke of a sanctuary built by travelers who crossed great waters in the name of protecting sacred knowledge. It warned that the chamber beneath the stone was not to be opened until the appointed time. The problem was that the soil surrounding the slab was far older than the late medieval period. Layers of compacted earth and plant matter suggested the slab had been buried centuries before Columbus sailed in the year 1492. That meant someone from the medieval world had travelled here long before Europe admitted such journeys were possible. The crew knew they had uncovered something world-changing. They began to dig deeper in hopes of finding the chamber mentioned in the inscription. But on the third night a storm rolled in from the sea, fierce and sudden. Their ship was thrown against the rocks. Supplies were ruined, and the excavation pit began to fill with water faster than they could dig it out. Desperate and exhausted, they abandoned the site and struggled back to their damaged ship. Only a few pages of the journal survived the storm, along with a rough sketch of the stone slab. When they returned home and tried to report their findings, no one believed them. Some officials dismissed the slap as a misunderstanding. Others warned the men not to pursue the matter. The sketches mysteriously vanished soon after. Today, the only proof of that first excavation is the journal kept by the crewman who found the stones. His handwriting trembles when he describes the artifact, as if he knew he had witnessed something history was not ready to accept. And somewhere beneath, the soil of the island the chamber mentioned in the inscription may still be waiting in silence. There are moments in history when the Vatican moves so quietly that only those watching very closely notice the shift. This was one of those moments. It began shortly after rumours of the 19th century excavation reached Europe, carried not through official channels, but through frightened sailors and scattered journal pages. At first, the church seemed uninterested, but then something changed. Local priests in northern villages began receiving unexpected visitors. These visitors were not dressed like ordinary clergy. They carried sealed letters, travelled with no escort, and asked questions that felt strangely out of place. They wanted to know about legends told by fishermen, about strange lights seen near the coast, about old stones that appeared after storms. They asked about nights when the ground shook for no reason, about forgotten ruins in the hills, about stories grandparents whispered to children long after sunset. These envoys never explained why they wanted this information. They only listened, nodded, and made notes in small leather books. When villagers asked who they were, the envoys simply said they were gathering information for the church archives, nothing more. But people felt uneasy. The envoys spoke many languages. They arrived at odd hours, and they seemed to know exactly where to go, as if following instructions long prepared. Some went to isolated farms miles from any official road. Others visited elderly people who had never written their stories down. It was as if the Vatican already knew that something had stirred on the second island, and now wanted to trace every rumour connected to it. One priest later admitted in a private letter that the envoys asked specifically about carved stones found near the coastline. They asked whether anyone had ever seen foreign symbols, circles, crosses, or patterns cut into the rock. They asked whether any objects had washed ashore after storms, especially objects made of metal. The priest wrote that the envoys reacted strangely when he mentioned an old tale about a buried chamber that villagers believed belonged to ancient travellers. He said their eyes sharpened with interest, and they asked him to repeat every detail exactly. Not long after these visits, several local records vanished from parish archives. Old journals disappeared. Drawings of stone markers went missing. Even folk tales recorded by travelling scholars were removed from libraries without explanation. The disappearances happened so quietly that some villagers did not notice until years later. Historians now believe the Vatican feared that the discovery on the island threatened a narrative they had protected for centuries. If medieval Europeans reached the Americas before Columbus, it would challenge the Church's carefully shaped story of exploration and divine mission. And if those early travellers were Templars carrying forbidden knowledge, the consequences for Church authority would be even greater. So the envoys continued their silent work. They gathered every scrap of information, erased anything that could draw too much attention, and reported back to Rome. What happened to their reports remains unknown. No one has ever seen them. No one even knows where they were stored. But one thing is certain. After the Vatican's sudden interest, the second island fell back into silence, as if someone wanted the world to forget it ever existed. Captain Jonathan Ainsworth was not the kind of man who believed in legends. He trusted maps, measurements, and the steady logic of the sea. But in the late 18th century, while commanding a small British survey vessel, he encountered something logic could not explain. His diary, later recovered in damaged form, begins calmly enough. He writes about storms, whales breaking the surface, and the constant struggle to chart coastlines swallowed by fog. Then the entries shift. On a cold morning in early summer, his crew spotted an island that did not appear on any chart. At first, Ainsworth assumed it was a simple surveying oversight, but when they approached the shore, he noticed the land looked strangely untouched. No houses, no boats, no signs of life at all. The crew anchored and stepped onto the rocky beach. Ainsworth described the ground as unnaturally smooth in places, almost polished. Then one of his men called out. Embedded in the bedrock was a metal ring, thick and perfectly shaped, as if forged by a master craftsman. The captain knew immediately that the Vikings sometimes used iron rings to secure their ships, but this ring was unlike anything he had seen. The metal was darker, heavier, and showed no rust despite being exposed to harsh sea winds. The diary grows tense from that moment on. Ainsworth writes that they followed a trail of stones leading inland. The stones formed geometric shapes, too precise to be natural. Some were carved with faint patterns that looked like symbols. When they reached a cliffside, one sailor spotted what he thought was a crack in the stone, but the closer they looked, the more they realized the crack was actually an entrance, a doorway. They forced it open and found a tunnel descending into darkness. The walls were lined with smooth stone blocks, and the ceiling arched overhead like the tunnels Ainsworth had seen in ancient European fortresses. The captain wrote that the air inside felt strangely warm, as if the tunnel was alive. They followed it only a short distance before the sound of shifting earth above them forced the men to retreat. Ainsworth planned to return the next day with lanterns and ropes. His final entry describes the uneasy feeling he could not shake. He said the island felt watched, as if something beneath the ground knew they had come too close. He wrote one last line. The builders of this place were not of this land. Then the diary ends. No more entries, no signature, nothing. Days later, Ainsworth's ship vanished. Another vessel reported seeing smoke on the horizon, but found no wreckage, no bodies, no cargo. The only reason the diary survived was because it had been sent ahead with a messenger who was meant to deliver it to the Admiralty after the expedition returned. When officials read it, they dismissed the account as fiction, the ramblings of a tired sailor. They sealed the diary away where it stayed for more than a century. But now, with new discoveries pointing toward the same island, the same tunnels, and the same impossible metalwork, Ainsworth's final words no longer seem like fantasy. They seem like a warning written by a man who saw the truth moments before the sea claimed him forever. Across the windswept landscapes of Scotland and the icy shores of Iceland, there are symbols carved into stone that do not match any known tradition. A circle with a star inside it, a ship with no sails, a cross flanked by two small dots. For centuries, locals dismissed them as decorative marks or forgotten clan signs. But in recent years, scholars have begun to link these symbols to something far older and far more mysterious. They match designs found on Templar artifacts. Not the common symbols everyone recognizes, but rare ones associated with a shadow group within the Order. This group called themselves the Brotherhood of the Northern Star. Little is known about them because they left almost no written records. Their history survives mostly through whispered stories and strange carvings, found in places where they were never supposed to be. According to legend, the Brotherhood formed after the Templars were forced to flee France in the early 14th century. While some knights escaped to Scotland and others to Portugal, a small group sailed north following ancient star routes passed down by Templar navigators. Their mission was said to be different from the rest. They were not guardians of wealth or relics. They were guardians of a location. A secret island hidden in fog and cold waters where knowledge too dangerous for the medieval world had been stored. This island was the twin to Oak Island, a mirror sanctuary meant to hold what couldn't be revealed. The Brotherhood vowed to protect it for as long as the stars shone above the northern seas. They swore their descendants would continue the duty, even if the world forgot why the island mattered. In Scotland, churches built centuries later contain carvings that match these secret marks. One chapel holds a stone pillar etched with a star inside a circle, positioned to catch light only on the winter solstice. In Iceland, small rural churches have wooden beams carved with ship symbols, displaying the same odd geometry used by medieval Templar navigators. These markers were hidden in plain sight, passed down by families claiming a quiet but unbroken connection to the sailors who vanished from La Rochelle. Members of the Brotherhood never appeared in official records. They lived as stonemasons, fishermen, and sometimes priests. Their lives looked ordinary on the surface, but they held knowledge of travel routes never revealed to kings or explorers. They taught their sons to watch the stars and to remember the shapes carved into the chapel stones. Each generation was told the same thing: guard the path, reveal nothing until the appointed hour. Today, descendants of these families still whisper about the Northern Star. Some hold keys passed down for generations, small pieces of metal engraved with the same circular design. They claim the keys were meant to open something far away, something no one alive has ever seen. Whether the Brotherhood still exists in its original form is unknown, but the symbols remain quietly waiting in stone and wood across Scotland and Iceland. They are reminders that someone once protected a secret hidden in the northern seas, and that perhaps the Brotherhood of the Northern Star is still watching for the day the second island returns to the world's memory. The discovery began with a simple ground survey. A team of archaeologists studying a remote island in the northern waters planned only to map its geology and identify old shoreline changes. They did not expect their instruments to detect hollow spaces beneath the ground. At first, the readings seemed impossible. The cavities were too large, too perfectly shaped, and too deep to be natural formations. The team assumed the equipment was malfunctioning, but when they repeated the scans, the same patterns appeared. There were chambers beneath the island. Not one or two, but an entire network stretching far underground. The archaeologists drilled a narrow testing shaft and lowered a small camera. The images they captured shocked them. The underground chambers were lined with smooth stone blocks, fitted with precision beyond anything expected from medieval builders. Some blocks were polished. Others showed carvings that looked like star patterns and compass symbols. Most astonishing of all, several chambers were aligned with the position of the sun on both the winter and summer solstices. The alignment was so exact that sunlight would strike specific points inside the vault at only 2 moments of the year. This was not the work of amateurs or accident. This was a design based on advanced knowledge of astronomy. When the archaeologists compared their findings to known structures around the world, only one site showed similar features: Oak Island. The infamous Money Pit and its surrounding shafts had long been believed to contain Templar engineering. But the chambers beneath the northern island were far more advanced. Instead of simple timber platforms, these vaults used stone arches and carefully balanced pressure points. Instead of basic flood tunnels, the scans suggested a complex water control system built with channels and valves. Whoever built this underground world possessed skills far beyond the average medieval craftsman. The deeper the archaeologists studied, the stranger the evidence became. One chamber contained carvings identical to those found in Rosslyn Chapel. Another displayed patterns matching symbols used by Templar navigators who sailed from La Rochelle before the order fell in the early 14th century. The team found no entrance to the vaults from the surface. Every chamber was sealed. Every passage was hidden. It was as if the builders intended the vault to be a perfect mirror to Oak Island, but one that would never be disturbed until the right moment. The archaeologists attempted to publish their findings. They prepared reports, diagrams, and photographs. But before the research could reach academic journals, funding was suddenly cut. Permissions to continue digging were revoked. Their notes and data were seized by the local authorities, who offered no explanation. The team was forced to leave the island with nothing but memories and a few private sketches. Yet, the evidence remains. Beneath the island lies a vault more sophisticated than anything discovered in North America. A mirror vault built with knowledge someone wanted hidden from the world. And if this island truly served as the twin to Oak Island, then the treasure buried here is not gold. It is a message carved into stone, waiting for the moment humanity is finally ready to understand it. Legends often grow from shadows, but the legend of the forbidden relic guarded by the second island begins long before the medieval world and reaches into the oldest layers of human memory. Sailors who braved the northern seas spoke of an object hidden beneath stone vaults, an object said to hold truths that could unravel the foundations of the world's great religions. Some claimed it came from early Christianity, a relic carried by followers who preserved teachings never accepted by the church. Others insisted it was far older, tied to the ancient rites of Egypt, or even to a forgotten age before written history. Whatever its origin, one detail appears again and again. The relic was not meant for the medieval world. It was meant for a time when humanity could face the truth without fear. The earliest clues come from fragmented Templar writings, recovered from monasteries across France and Portugal. These texts mention a sacred burden transported across the sea by a group of chosen knights who sailed under star maps no longer found in any library. The writings describe the object using strange and poetic phrases: the light that came before the sun, the memory of the first temple, the voice of the beginning. Scholars have attempted to interpret these phrases for centuries, but no single explanation fits. If the relic belonged to early Christianity, it may have contained teachings that challenged the church's authority. Some believe it could have been a gospel older than the ones preserved in the Bible. a record of Jesus speaking not as a distant divine figure, but as a teacher urging people to seek truth within themselves. Such a message would have threatened the Church's claim to spiritual control. If the relic came from ancient Egypt, it might have held knowledge linking early Christian symbolism with far older beliefs about the soul, the afterlife, and the nature of creation. This could explain why Egyptian symbols appear in some Templar structures carved into stone as quiet reminders of a lineage the Church rejected. But the most unsettling theory is the oldest one. Some stories claim the relic preserves a cosmology predating the Bible, a map of the universe that doesn't match the version taught by any major religion. According to this idea, the relic contains accounts of civilizations that rose and fell long before humanity's accepted timeline. It describes cycles of destruction and rebirth, the rise of lost knowledge, and the existence of beings of light, not bound to the physical world. If such a relic were real, and if the Templars truly carried it across the Atlantic during the early 14th century, then the Church had every reason to fear it. A relic that rewrites creation, challenges doctrine, or reveals suppressed truth could weaken centuries of authority. This is why many believe the second island was built, not to hide treasure, but to hide this relic. The Templars may have known they would eventually fall. They knew their enemies were powerful and relentless. So they created a sanctuary beyond reach, protected by symbols, traps, and secrecy. A place where the forbidden could sleep safely until the world grew strong enough to question everything. Whether the relic still lies beneath the island remains unknown. But the legends survive, whispered as if the truth is waiting just below the surface, patient as the sea itself. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, governments across Europe and North America showed immense interest in exploring the Arctic. They funded ships, hired skilled navigators, and poured resources into mapping coastlines that had remained mysterious for centuries. Then something changed. Almost overnight funding vanished. Surveys were abandoned. Promising expeditions were shut down with no explanation. At first, historians believed economic problems or shifting political priorities caused the sudden withdrawal. But recently uncovered documents suggest there was something else at work. In one government archive, a researcher found a report describing unusual stone formations discovered on an unnamed island. The report mentions geometric shapes carved into bedrock and metal objects that did not match any known civilization in the region. The document ends abruptly, as if someone removed the remaining pages. Shortly after this report was filed, the entire project was terminated. Similar patterns appear in multiple countries. A Canadian survey from the early 1900s described finding strange underground echoes during a drilling operation. The team noted that the readings resembled artificial chambers rather than natural formations. Within a month, the survey was closed, and every file related to it was marked restricted. A Scandinavian expedition in the early 20th century recorded seeing symbols carved into cliff faces that matched Templar designs. Their journals were confiscated upon return, and the explorers never received permission to publish their findings. Some of them left academia completely and refused to speak about their work again. It is as if a silent order rippled across nations, instructing officials to bury anything connected to the mysterious island. Even more troubling is what happened to the researchers themselves. Some simply disappeared from public life. They resigned from their positions with no reason given. They moved away. They stopped answering letters. A few were later reported to have died under strange circumstances, often while travelling alone. In one case, a respected geologist working on Arctic mapping resigned suddenly in 1918. His final letter to a colleague mentioned discovering something that did not belong to any culture on record. He wrote that he feared the discovery would be misunderstood or suppressed. After that, no one heard from him again. His body was never found. The sealed files add another layer of mystery. Freedom of Information requests reveal entire folders classified for reasons listed only as national interest. Yet, these folders are not military reports or diplomatic communications. They contain geological surveys, photographs of rocks, notes on stone shapes and alignment patterns. Why would governments hide this? Some believe they were pressured by powerful institutions that feared the truth would challenge long-accepted narratives about exploration history and the origins of certain ancient traditions. If the island contained evidence of Templar activity, centuries before Columbus set sail, in 1492, it would rewrite the story of the New World. And if the island held a relic capable of challenging religious foundations, the political consequences would be even greater. The silent suppression turned the northern island into a forbidden subject. Researchers learned not to ask questions. Governments learned to look the other way. And the island continued to wait in the cold fog, guarding a secret powerful enough to reshape history if anyone dared to uncover it. The discovery of the inscribed stone began with a tremor. It was a small shaking of the ground, hardly noticeable, but enough to loosen the soil on the northern side of the island. After the tremor, a slab of stone emerged from the earth like a giant waking from sleep. At first, the research team believed it was nothing more than a glacial boulder pushed upward by shifting frost. But as the dirt fell away, a smooth surface appeared. Then lines. Then symbols. The slab was enormous, larger than any marker found on Oak Island. It stood at an angle, half buried, with its carved face turned toward the rising sun. When the archaeologists brushed the dirt from the surface, they froze. The script carved into the stone matched the mysterious Oak Island stone long lost to history, except through copies made by early treasure hunters. But this stone was not a duplicate. It carried far more text, and the message was not the same. The Oak Island stone was often translated as a simple warning about treasure buried deep below. But the northern slab carried a message far more unsettling. He who unseals this place unseals mankind's forgotten past. The carving was deep and precise, as if made with tools sharper than anything the medieval world possessed. The letters followed a pattern of medieval Latin mixed with symbols used by Templar navigators. It was a language built for secrecy, meant to be understood only by those trained in its codes. For days, the team worked to uncover the rest of the slab. As more soil was removed, they found additional lines hinting at a great division in history, a split between the world people believe exists and the world that actually existed. The text referred to twin sanctuaries built across the sea. One was to be revealed at the right moment. The other was to remain hidden until humanity was prepared for truth without fear. These words matched legends of the second island shared by secret societies for centuries. They also explained why the island had been kept out of maps and why so many expeditions had been silenced. The slab was not a warning. It was a promise. It suggested that the builders expected a future generation to rediscover what had been lost. Beneath the slab, the ground showed signs of tampering. Someone had attempted to dig there long ago, but stopped, perhaps realizing the vault was not meant to be opened. The archaeologists debated lifting the stone to see what lay underneath. But the moment they announced their plans, their communication channels went silent. Funding was paused. Authorities demanded a halt to all excavation activities. Security teams arrived without explanation and removed both the slab and the researchers from the site. No one was told where the stone was taken. What remains today are the notes copied by one of the archaeologists before they were forced to leave. His handwriting trembles as he writes the final line of the inscription. To reveal the past is to awaken the world. He believed the slab was not a threat, but an invitation to rediscover a history rewritten by those who feared its consequences. Somewhere in a hidden vault, the stone now sits in silence. But the message carved into its surface continues to echo across time, warning that the truth, once found, cannot be sealed again. Long before archaeologists uncovered the underground chambers of the second island, historians already knew that the Templars were more than warriors. They were expert navigators and mathematicians trained to read the stars with a precision unusual for medieval Europe. Their voyages across the Mediterranean and the Atlantic relied not only on courage, but on knowledge preserved from older civilizations. Yet nothing in the known Templar record comes close to explaining the astronomical design found beneath the northern island. When researchers mapped the layout of the vaults, they realized the chambers were aligned with star patterns not recorded in any medieval star chart. The alignments didn't match the constellations as they appeared in the 14th century when the Templars fled France. Instead, they matched star positions from a far earlier era, hundreds or even thousands of years earlier. This discovery raised a troubling possibility. The Templars may not have built the original foundation of the vault. They may have found something older and expanded upon it. Ancient traditions from Europe and the Middle East spoke of star temples built to mirror the heavens. Some were said to predate written history and were created by cultures whose knowledge of astronomy exceeded that of later civilizations. At first, such stories sounded like myth, but the alignment of the vault suggested something extraordinary. The northern chamber pointed directly toward the rising position of a star that modern astronomers call Thuban. In ancient times, Thuban served as the pole star, long before Polaris took its place. This means the chamber was designed using a sky older than the medieval world. Another chamber aligned with the setting of Sirius, a star revered in ancient Egypt for its connection to cycles of life and time. The alignment is so precise that it matches the star's position as it appeared thousands of years ago. No medieval navigator could have calculated this. So who could? Some archaeologists now believe an unknown civilization built the first layer of the vault. A culture skilled in astronomy and engineering, capable of shaping stone and earth in ways lost to later ages. The Templars may have discovered this ancient structure during their travels in the Middle East or through manuscripts preserved by secret communities. When their order fell in the early 14th century, they may have used this knowledge to hide materials too dangerous to leave behind. This theory explains why the vault on the island feels both medieval and prehistoric. The upper chambers show Templar symbols and Christian touches. But the deeper layout speaks of something far older, with patterns resembling ancient star temples found in distant parts of the world. If the Templars built upon an ancient foundation, they would have understood the danger and the power of what they found. They would have known it challenged the history written by kings and the doctrines enforced by the Church. The idea that humans once understood the heavens with such precision threatens the belief that medieval Europe crawled out of darkness into enlightenment. It suggests the light was there all along, buried beneath centuries of forgetfulness. The hidden astronomers who designed the first vault may have left their message in stone, waiting for a time when humanity would finally look up and remember. Modern explorers believed they were prepared for anything the island could hide. They had advanced tools, satellite mapping, and diving equipment capable of reaching depths the early treasure hunters could never imagine. But nothing prepared them for what happened when they drilled near one of the suspected entrances to the underground vault. It began with a soft rumble beneath the ground, a vibration that seemed to pulse through the soil like a heartbeat. The explorers stopped their work immediately, thinking they might have hit a natural pocket of water or a weak section of rock. Then the sound grew louder. Within seconds, water burst upward from the drilling hole with incredible force. The team scrambled back as a geyser shot into the air. The water was ice cold and carried traces of fine sand and crushed shells, material that appeared to come from deep underground, rather than from the nearby coastline. It took only moments for the team to realize what they had triggered: a flood trap. A system so carefully designed and so perfectly sealed that it had remained functional for centuries. The explorers watched in disbelief as more water began pouring into the area through cracks in the ground. Channels hidden beneath the soil carried the water with precision, directing it toward the excavation site exactly as the engineers had intended long ago. The team retreated to higher ground, observing as the water filled the area they had been working in. The flooding stopped at a precise level, not overflowing but settling into a contained pool. This was not the behavior of a natural spring. It was a deliberate mechanism triggered by disturbance. Similar traps were known from Oak Island, but those had deteriorated over time. This trap was far more sophisticated and astonishingly intact. Once the flooding slowed, the explorers attempted to trace the water's path using ground sensors. What they found shocked them. The water had been redirected from multiple channels carved deep within the island. These channels connected to chambers and tunnels that formed a complex defensive system. The mechanism was designed not only to flood intruders, but to preserve the underground vault by preventing uncontrolled collapse. The more they studied it, the clearer the message became. Whoever engineered the system wanted the vault protected at any cost. The precision of the design suggested a level of engineering skill far beyond the technology of the early 14th century. The channels were angled perfectly to use the natural pressure of the sea. Valve-like structures controlled the flow of water, even though no moving parts remained. The trap was not just a defense. It was a guardian, a mechanism designed to respond only when the island sensed a threat. If the Templars were responsible for this engineering, then they possessed knowledge far more advanced than historians have ever acknowledged. If they expanded an older system built by an ancient civilization, then they understood its purpose and improved it. Either possibility raises unsettling questions. When the explorers attempted to resume their work days later, they found the ground too unstable to continue. The island had closed itself. It was as if the mechanism had done exactly what it was built to do: protect the secret, guard the past, and warn anyone who dared dig deeper that the vault was not meant to be opened lightly. Deep beneath the island, beyond the chambers aligned to ancient stars, and past the tunnels shaped with impossible precision, lies a single structure that has come to define every mystery surrounding the second island. It is a stone door, massive and seamless, fitted so tightly into the surrounding walls that not even a slip of paper can slide between the cracks. The door stands at the end of a narrow corridor, carved with symbols of circles, spirals, and patterns that resemble constellations. But the most striking features are the 7 Templar crosses engraved in a perfect arc across the face of the stone. Each cross is carved with a different depth and angle, as if they serve not as decoration, but as part of a mechanism. The chamber around the door is silent, untouched by time. Air inside feels still and heavy, as though sealed centuries ago. When modern explorers first reached the door, they assumed it was nothing more than a barrier they could dismantle with the right tools. They brought drills, lasers, and cutting equipment. But the stone resisted everything. Tools dulled against its surface. Lasers left no mark. Even chemical tests failed to weaken it. It was as if the material was designed to resist any attempt to break it open. Some researchers suggested the door might be made from a mixture of stone and a binding compound unknown to medieval builders. Others believed it was crafted using ancient techniques lost long before the Templars arrived. The 7 crosses, however, held the greatest mystery. When examined closely, faint grooves connected the crosses, forming a network of pathways that resembled an elaborate puzzle. These grooves seemed to follow a pattern related to the solstice alignments built elsewhere in the vault. It became clear that the door was not meant to be forced open. It was meant to be unlocked through a mechanism now lost to history. The explorers searched the surrounding chambers for clues. They found small depressions in the floor marking where objects may have once stood. They discovered lines in the walls that matched star paths traced by ancient astronomers. Every sign pointed to the same conclusion. The door was designed to respond to a sequence involving light, pressure, or sound. A ritual of knowledge rather than brute force. Legends hinted that the Templars possessed a device capable of unlocking the door, a tool passed between navigators trained in sacred geometry. Some called it the compass of the 7 paths. Others referred to it as the key of the Northern Star. No one knows what happened to it after the Templars fled in the early 14th century. Without the mechanism, the door remains sealed. Every attempt to replicate the needed sequence has failed. The stone remains cold and silent. Some claim the door reacts faintly when touched at certain times of year, as if waiting for a specific moment hidden in the movement of the heavens. Others believe the device meant to unlock it still exists somewhere in the world, guarded by descendants of those who once travelled across the sea. The unopened door stands as the last barrier between the world and the truth buried beneath the island. Whatever lies behind it has been protected with a level of brilliance and purpose that transcends any single era. And until the true key is found, the chamber remains a reminder that some secrets resist time itself. The breakthrough happened by accident. After years of studying the underground chambers, a small research team discovered a narrow fault in the stone near the western wall of the vault. At first it looked like nothing more than a crack caused by natural shifting. But when one of the explorers pushed against it, the stone shifted just enough to reveal a hidden passage. It was barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through, yet it led to a space no one had ever documented, a chamber carved with smooth walls, untouched by water, time, or intruders. The air inside felt ancient, dry, and heavy with dust that hadn't moved in centuries. The explorers shined their lights and froze. Before them lay shelves carved directly into the stone, each shelf holding objects wrapped in brittle cloth. On the floor beneath them were metallic tablets reflecting the faint light like mirrors. The team approached slowly, overwhelmed by the realization that they were staring at the contents of a vault never meant to be opened by the modern world. One explorer unwrapped a cloth bundle with shaking hands. Inside was a scroll, not made from paper or simple parchment, but from a material that looked almost metallic, thin and flexible. The writing upon it shimmered faintly in the light. The language was unfamiliar, a mix of symbols and characters that resembled early Greek, yet felt older, as if belonging to a civilization lost to time. Another explorer picked up one of the metallic tablets. It was engraved with diagrams showing star patterns that didn't match the sky as it appeared in the 14th century. These patterns matched the ancient configurations that scholars believe guided the earliest astronomers. One diagram resembled the structure of the vault itself. Another showed a map of land masses positioned differently than they appear today. The team realized they were looking at knowledge preserved across centuries, maybe across ages. They recorded everything they could in the short moments they had. But the discovery did not remain secret or long. Within hours of transmitting a partial report to their research sponsor, all communication channels went silent. Their equipment shut down. A helicopter appeared on the horizon, landing on the island with military precision. The men who stepped out did not introduce themselves. They wore no insignias. Their clothing bore no flags. They moved with the confidence of people who had been here before. They ordered the team to step away from the vault. When the explorers protested, they were escorted off the island without explanation. Their cameras, notes, and samples were confiscated. Every recording they made vanished. The metallic tablet they had placed in a sealed case was taken without a word. Days later, the explorers attempted to speak publicly about their discovery. They found doors closing wherever they turned. Funding disappeared. Interviews were cancelled. Some were warned not to pursue the matter for their own safety. The chamber they entered has never been acknowledged by any official record. The elite organization that intervened left no trace, as if the event had never occurred. Yet the team remembers what they saw. They remember the scrolls that shimmered in the light, the tablets engraved with forgotten star maps, and the sense that they had stepped into a part of human history deliberately concealed for centuries. The revelation never reached the world because powerful forces made sure it remained buried. But the team knows one thing. What lay inside the vault was not treasure. It was truth. And truth is far harder to hide forever. In the final months after the breached vault and the sudden intervention, the island slipped back into silence as quickly as it had emerged into the light. Governments issued statements that the area had been declared protected due to its delicate ecosystem. New laws labelled it a conservation zone. No boats were permitted within several miles of its shores. No research teams were granted permission to return. Even satellite imaging of the island became strangely limited, as though someone had placed a curtain over the land from above. Officials claimed nothing of importance had been found. They insisted the island contained no archaeological value, and that earlier reports were exaggerated or misunderstood. Yet, their actions told a different story. Armed patrols began circling the waters. A temporary research station was erected on the mainland to monitor activity, but no one was allowed to approach it. When journalists tried to investigate, they were turned away with vague explanations. Meanwhile, whispers spread through academic circles. Some said the vault held scrolls older than any known scripture. Others claimed the metallic tablets revealed star charts from a forgotten civilization. A few whispered that the relic hidden behind the sealed door challenged the very timeline of human history. None of these rumors could be confirmed, yet every researcher who had worked near the island felt the same chill. The silence was too controlled, too absolute. One of the explorers from the original team attempted to publish an account of their discovery. Before the paper reached print, the journal withdrew it, citing concerns about authenticity. Another team member found their professional emails mysteriously erased. A third reported being followed for weeks by an unmarked vehicle. Fear settled over them like a permanent fog. They understood that someone wanted the second island to fade away, to slip back into myth where it once hid. On the surface, the world moved on. News cycles shifted. New discoveries elsewhere stole attention. The public forgot the brief excitement surrounding the mysterious northern island. But beneath that quiet, a deeper truth lingered. The island had revealed too much. It had shown that medieval history was not as simple as the textbooks claimed. It hinted that explorers reached the Americas long before Columbus in 1492. It suggested that the Templars carried knowledge far older than Europe itself. And perhaps most threatening of all, it proved that there were forces willing to bury the truth if it endangered the stories humanity had been taught to believe. Today the island sits untouched behind its invisible wall. Waves crash against its rocky cliffs. The underground vault sleeps beneath layers of stone. The sealed door with 7 crosses waits in the dark, holding secrets meant for a world more prepared than ours. Some say the silence is permanent. Others believe it is only temporary. That one day the truth buried beneath the island will rise again, no matter how many guards or locked files stand in its way. For now, the second island has returned to silence. But silence does not erase truth. It only postpones the moment when the world finally hears it.